Yeah,
All right.
just let me, yeah, can you try to, do you send the request?
Yes,
Yes,
I've just
there
sent
you
it.
go.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
well, let's start with the presentation and thank you, Jaina and Alejandra, for being here and help us and try to dive in and understand this interview world that we always struggle with. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So, can you see my screen? Can you see it? Good. Okay, perfect. So I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Alejandra, and I am the bilingual recruiter with Vanderbilt Mortgage. And then today I do have one of our hiring managers from one of our teams, Jaina Castro. And so I'll let her introduce herself a little bit as well. Oh, I'm sorry, Jaina. I don't think we can hear you.
Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Mm-mm. Okay. So Dinah will jump in at the end and she'll give some perspective. Again, I'm a recruiter, so I'm on one side of the, hiring process, and she's a hiring manager, so she does have a different perspective. So I'd love for you guys to hear a little bit more about her process and how she does her interviews. So today we are going to be talking about some interview best practices, just a little bit of how to prepare for an interview, some best practices during the interview, what to do after an interview, and then, of course, we'll talk a little bit more about our company. So again, that's a little bit of what we're going to do. I'll go over our company first, just so you guys understand who we are and how we partner with Centro Hispano. Then we'll go into some interviews, best practices. Of course, this isn't a live session, but if you have any questions, my contact information will be at the end of the presentation. And then Marlene can also share that information with you as well. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about some of the career opportunities that our company currently has to offer. So to start off, just an overview of Vanderbilt Mortgage. So we are part of the Clayton Enterprise. We provide all of the financial services to customers who purchase homes from Clayton. And so what that means is that we offer mortgage loans to them. So we do everything from originating the loan, which means essentially creating it, all the way through to the end once it's paid out or if it's defaulted for whatever reason, and all of the servicing in between. We've been in business for about 50 plus years. And we are located in Maryville, Tennessee, so about 30 minutes from Knoxville to downtown Knoxville. And our company's main goal is to stay committed to making home ownership more attainable for families all throughout the United States. So we do serve all of the contiguous states. And so we are very lucky to say that we provide those services for, a huge amount of customers. All right, so jumping right into our interview practices. So, the biggest, most common interview mistakes that we see, the first one is a lack of preparation. And when I say lack of preparation, I mean lack of preparation when it comes to not knowing what you are interviewing for, what role you are interviewing for, what company you're interviewing for, not, being attentive and being prepared to answer those questions that are going to be coming from the interviewer. That is lack of preparation, and it is a huge turnoff for us recruiters and hiring managers as well. Speaking too little or too much sometimes can also be a little bit off-putting. You want to have a well-rounded answer without going into too much detail or talking in circles. But you also don't want it to be too brief to where the interviewers feel like they have to probe more on what you're saying or they're not getting enough out of your answers. Not answering the questions directly, again, goes back to just kind of talking in circles. If there's a question, typically questions will have some sort of format to that answer. And so make sure you kind of stick to that and answer the question, not just talking in circles and thinking that that's going to be enough to get you by. Having a negative attitude or bad mouthing your previous employers, again, it talks very poorly about you. If you have a negative attitude, it can be very easily perceived by an interviewer. And then mad mouthing your previous employers. Of course, you don't always leave your previous employer in the best terms. However, there is a way to talk about those experiences without necessarily speaking poorly on their part. We disagreed on our views. I felt like my career was heading a different way that they were aligning with. And so I decided to part ways. There's different ways to kind of set that up to where you are not necessarily speaking really negatively about that person. Me as a recruiter, and I'm sure Jaina would probably agree, if we hear somebody speaking negatively about their previous employer, all that tells me is that you are a very negative person who will probably speak negatively about us. And that doesn't really align with our company culture. And so that is, a big reason to turn somebody down. And then, of course, poor body language. We'll talk a little bit more about in detail about this, but just making sure that you are approachable in your interview. Of course, it's very nerve-wracking, and it's very easy to kind of get into those bad habits of poor body language, but just kind of keeping it in the back of your mind, and remembering to just kind of give a feel that you are very open to that interview is always going to be a plus. All right, so how to prepare for your interview. The first and the most important thing is to do your research. So make sure you research the company, the history of the company, the culture of the company, of course, get a good understanding of the role, whether that be from the job description specifically, or if you talk to your recruiter, make sure you get a really good understanding of the position that you're applying for. And then it's also really good practice to ask your recruiter who you are interviewing with. They will not mind sharing those names with you, and it makes you stand out from the rest when you are prepared and you kind of know who you're going to be talking to in that first interview. So doing your research is probably the most important step to preparing for your interview. Now, you don't have to go into a lot of detail when it comes to the company's history, but learning, having a good basic understanding of what they do is really going to put you above the rest. The second thing to prepare for is, of course, again, reviewing the job description and make sure you understand how your previous experience aligns with the job. There's a lot of roles that will hire based on what we call transferable skills, which means that you don't necessarily have to be in the exact same position before to be able to do the job that you are applying for. But if you have those transferable skills like communication, customer service, attention to detail, those kinds of things are always transferable from certain roles to other roles. And so make sure that your experience aligns with the position that you are applying for, and that way you can speak to it more clearly during the interview. It's also a good practice to practice common interview questions. The most common ones, and typically the ones that an interviewer will start off with, are tell me about you, tell me about your background, what interested you in this company, what interested you in this role specifically, because there may be multiple roles open with a company. So make sure you have a well thought out answer to these basic questions. Again, there's no need to go into a lot of detail, but a well thought rounded answer that gives more of an insight as to who you are and how you can add to the company culture is always a great starter. And then the last point is to use the STAR method for behavioral questions. And I'll go into a little bit more detail, but essentially, behavioral based questions are those that ask you to go back to your previous job experiences and take specific examples from those to answer the question. And so the STAR method, basically what it stands for is situation, task, action, and then results. And so again, these are used to answer behavioral based questions that typically sound something like, tell me about a time when, or describe a situation where, or give me an example of. And again, these are pulling from realistic, specific examples that can go back to any of your prior jobs that obviously align with what the question is asking for. And again, these typically align with the job relevant skills, and they really are there to allow the interviewer to better assess their candidates. So instead of asking more hypothetical questions, these are realistic situations that you have already been in, that you did something, and then there was a tangible result to that situation. And so these help our interviewers assess how you will react in similar situations in this new job. So that kind of tells the interviewer better if you would be able to do the job or not. Um, our company interviews like that, Vanderbilt does, and there's other big companies that are kind of falling into line with this new method. So I always encourage all of my candidates to kind of practice it because odds are is that the next company that you apply for will have this type of interviewing style. So Amazon, Google, Apple, Pfizer, I believe Tesla, Procter and Gamble, maybe. And there's a ton more that are currently using this type of interviewing. So it's always good practice to do a little bit of research on it as well. And so more into what the STAR method looks like. So again, it stands for situation, task, action, results. So the way that you want to frame your answer is almost like a short story where you set the scene, which is the situation. So for me, for example, it would be back when I was working as a bookkeeper at FNS Projects. So that's the situation. I set the scene. What was my task? So describe the purpose of, the situation. So I was tasked with creating monthly reports for tax purposes. So again, that was my task. What was my action? So that's where you explain what you did. And typically the action is the meat and potatoes of your answer. So that's where most of your time is going to be spent. You talk about what you did, who you spoke to, what research you did, what answers you found, everything that involves the process of that situation. And then the result is always the outcome. So if there's any sort of measurable number or customer satisfaction or positive review, those are tangible results that kind of, it's the last little bow or the cherry on top of your answer. That's mostly where people forget and it falls off, but that's okay. Interviewers are trained to kind of probe more on your answers, but it's always good to kind of not forget to share that result because, again, it lets us know, especially if there was a positive outcome. Pro tip on this, be concise but thorough. You don't want to, again, speak in circles or give an overly long answer because then that kind of shows that there's a lack of communication skills, but you want to be thorough enough to where you're hitting every single point of the STAR method. So just kind of practicing again with different questions and pulling from those realistic work experiences is going to be great when you're preparing for your interview. Now, we did talk about body language and communication and how poor body language can definitely be a huge mistake when interviewing. So, the first thing I will say about this is that you want to maintain good posture and eye contact with your interviewers. So, make sure you are, attentive, you're sitting up straight, you're not kind of slouching on the table or touching around. Maintain eye contact. I know it can be a little bit nerve-wracking, especially or intimidating, especially in a room full of people you don't know. But it's always good practice to kind of make eye contact, maybe look away, make eye contact again, look away. So just kind of a balance from that. Of course, talk in a very confident and friendly tone. You don't want to come off as being, overly confident, but it's always good to know to let the interviewer know that you know what you're talking about, you practiced, you were prepared. It's obviously okay to be nervous, and most interviewers will tell you it's okay to be nervous. However, trying to move past that and maintaining that confidence and being really friendly and being really open, and trying to break the ice again will definitely make the interview easier for you and the interviewer. You want to avoid fidgeting or crossing your arms. So the crossing of the arms, that literally in body language means that you do not want to be approached. And so again, you want to make sure that you keep an approachable form to you while you are interviewing. And fidgeting, I know it's very easy. I do it a lot, and I also talk with my hands a lot. But again, if it's something that you kind of keep in the back of your mind and you try to avoid it, then that also will not so much show that you are nervous and will probably help make the interview go smoother. And then the last thing is you want to show enthusiasm and definitely show professionalism. So remember that you are interviewing in a very professional environment, regardless of the job. And professionalism is the first thing that interviewers we look at whenever we're talking to somebody or even meeting them in person. You also want to show that you are excited about the job. I'm not saying that you have to come in there and be jumping and screaming that you want this job, but just show excitement and show that you are really interested. That is definitely going to put you ahead of a lot of other candidates who are maybe a little bit more refrained from showing those kinds of emotions. So at the end of the interview, typically interviewers will say, "Do you have any questions for me?" And it's not bad if you don't, but it definitely makes you stand out if you do. And the reason why I say that is because it shows that you are interested. It shows that you are engaged in the conversation, that you've done your research, or that you want more information about the company or the position. And so, some of the great questions to ask, whenever somebody says, "What are some questions that you have for me?" The biggest one, what does success look like in this role? Typically, a lot of people will frame it like, what do the first 3 or 6 months look like for somebody to be successful in the role? That's also a really good way of framing it. What are some of the team's biggest challenges? And sometimes you can add on to that. And how do you expect someone coming into this new role to help with those challenges? That's always a really good one. It shows initiative and it shows that you are proactive and you want to work with the team. How does this role contribute to the company's goal? That really shows that you are interested in how this particular role plays into the bigger picture of the company. And it is a great opportunity for your interviewer to kind of talk a little bit more about the department or the position and how it aligns with the company's goals. It works with other departments, so it gives the interviewer a great opportunity to kind of talk a little bit more about the company. And then, of course, the most common one that we get is, what are the next steps in the hiring process? And now that might look a little bit different depending on who you're talking to, whether it's a recruiter or hiring manager. But essentially, that gives them an opportunity to let you know where to go from here. You're here from us in 48 to 72 hours, or your recruiter will be reaching out to you, or we'd love to set up, a following interview for you. So it will look a little bit different depending on who you are speaking to, but it's a great question so that you know what your expectations are, and so that you also set expectations for the hiring team as well. So the biggest thing is following up after you complete any sort of interview, whether that be with a recruiter, if it's an initial interview, or you've already met with hiring managers. It's always great to send a thank you email within 24 hours of the interview. I will say that typically the candidates that I've received thank you emails from, they're usually hired. And the reason being is because they really stand out. Not a lot of people think to send a thank you email, but whether it's to me specifically as a recruiter or directly to those hiring managers, it definitely makes you stand out because not a lot of people think to do that. So it's a great tip. In that email, of course, keep it very brief and very authentic. Just express your gratitude, of course, for taking their time to interview. Reiterate that you are really interested and that your experiences definitely align with the company as well as with the specific role that you're applying to. And just be really authentic in that email. I know we are all fans of using AI. However, we can really tell whenever you put that into ChatGPT and send that over. So just make sure it sounds a lot like you. That keeps it more personalized. And again, it makes you stand out more. And then, of course, utilize your recruiter for questions or updates as appropriate. In our company, best practice is that we will follow up with you no longer than 48 to 72 hours. We really try to keep communication to a maximum, and making sure that you are aware of the hiring process and where we're at. However, not all companies are like that. So if you feel like you haven't heard in a little while, and of course you're still interested in the position, then it's definitely encouraged that you reach out to your recruiter to make sure you get an update on the process. So that was a little bit about, our interview best practices. I don't know if Jaina wants to kind of jump in here, if she has anything that she wants to add before I kind of go into some of the career opportunities we have with our company.
Yeah, there were a couple of things. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great, great. So my name is Gina Castro, and I am a bilingual originations manager for Vanderbilt Mortgage, and I'm excited to be on here. So thank you guys for your time. Something that stands out to me too is people being able, when they talk about an opportunity or an area of opportunity, following that up with what they've done to overcome that. So it's important that, hey, we all have things that we're working on, but being sure that you share, yes, I identified that or I shared that, or self-awareness, whatever the case may be, but being sure to share how you're overcoming or working on that opportunity. So that shows growth, that shows self-awareness, and that shows your ability to receive feedback. So that's something that is really important that I look for. The other thing is back to the questions, having thoughtful questions. So just like that thoughtful questions and research at the beginning, having thoughtful questions at the end. I think that that's important rather than just some canned, again, the internet is great. There's a lot of great information out there, but we can tell when the responses or the questions are just copy and paste that you memorize, but being authentic and being yourself and really having good active listening throughout the interview to help you formulate those questions make you stand out as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Particularly, when you're talking about your opportunities, or, a lot of people like to call them weaknesses. We like to call them opportunities. Whenever you're talking about those, it does show, like Gina said, a lot of growth and a lot of adaptability. Whenever you're able to say, this is where I was kind of falling off, but this is what I've been doing to improve. That shows a lot of coachability skills, which in our company is one of the biggest things that we kind of look for. And honestly, most of our positions, being able to be coached in that skill and being able to take that feedback and apply it to future situations, it's going to be huge. So it is always a hard question when you get asked, what are your weaknesses or what are some areas of opportunities? But if you're able to kind of redirect it in a positive way, then again, to Gina's point, that's something that's going to definitely make you stand out, just from saying, oh, my area of opportunity is that I don't like talking to people. Okay, well, that's not a good look. So perfect. Thank you, Jaina, for your insight. So as far as career opportunities, our company is currently hiring within different departments. The top two that we currently have are our collections and our call center departments. These are some of our more entry-level positions where we don't necessarily look for any sort of previous experience. It's really more about those skills that are applicable to the job, particularly your communication skills. And so any sort of, customer service role that you've previously been in is highly, something that we highly sought out for these positions, but not necessary. And then, of course, we do have some positions within our loan originations group. That's where Jaina works at. And so these people are, again, working on the front end with customers applying for a mortgage loan with us. So there is still a lot of customer contact, but there's also a lot on the back end that takes place. So reviewing applications, reviewing credit, document review, all that kind of stuff. But it is a really great opportunity as well. And then we do have some positions open within our accounting group. However, I will say for our accounting group, we do require that you have an accounting degree. But again, if it's something that you're really interested in and really passionate about, we do have a ton of opportunities in that group as well. And so just to kind of finalize it here, these are all of the contact information for the recruiting group. So there is 4 of us on the team. My name again is Alejandra. I'm the bilingual recruiter. But we have Hannah, Brandy, and Trey as well. And we do all kind of work in different departments. So depending on the position that you may apply for or that you're interested in, you may be hearing from one of us. I also linked our careers website so you guys can check out all of the open positions that we currently have. It's vmfcareers.com. And then, of course, if you wanted to kind of browse all of the careers within the Clayton Enterprise, that's going to be at careers.claytonhomes.com. We are very active on LinkedIn, Handshake, which is typically more for like college students. And then we do also have a Facebook page that you can follow us at. But always the best way to reach me is via email. So if you're ever interested, feel free to reach out to me and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you, Jaina. I just have I don't know. I think everybody here have experienced this question, like what is the most challenging part, or what was one of the biggest challenges in your previous role? And I think that's a very tricky question because, of course, you cannot say that you didn't have any challenge, right? But what is one insight that you can give us about that? Because I found it personally, I found it very tricky. And that's when I feel nervous when somebody asks me that, and I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do or what to say, like the correct way to answer that. What do you think it's a good approach for that question?
I think that that's something that goes back to what I was mentioning. Oftentimes, I'm sure we've all had challenges. Gosh, I've had many challenges, right? But what is something that you had a challenge with that you took the feedback, that you put it into action, and that you grew from it? So drawing back to your experiences to be able to say, I had this challenge, I listened to my manager, my peer, whoever it was, and I went ahead and I put action to that. And while it wasn't a challenge up front, I've overcome that. Here I am on the other side. And sometimes we could also be very honest and transparent with the fact that, hey, I know that this is a challenge that I will always be working on, and this is what I have in place to be able to be self-aware to overcome that. I will always have to pay, whatever the case may be, attention to detail. So I double check this twice, or I know that my time management, so I have my calendar set up, right? or I add on too many things on my plate. So I reprioritize and I look at the things that I've committed to this week to make sure that I have committed to what I can commit to. So anything that you could provide with being able to show the progress that you've made and the actions that you're taking to make sure that that's still in check.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add to that. I think that's the best way to respond to it. Of course, we all have challenges in our current roles, in our previous roles. I mean, whatever that looks like, nobody's perfect, right? So I think the
Yeah.
most important thing to know, to Dinah's point, whenever you're answering that type of question is, how did you grow from those challenges and those difficulties? And again, that's just going to show that you know how to take feedback and that you can apply it to future situations, that you are able to grow and that you are coachable throughout your role. And those are things that I think most companies would definitely look for in a candidate.
Great. Thank you so much. I bet a lot of people have experienced that and they get like really nervous about that kind of questions, no? Thank you so much again, Alejandra and Jaina. I really appreciate your time and your valuable experience because this will help us to grow like together. And hopefully this is very helpful for our participants. I'm gonna share this recording and well, I just want to add that. Thank you. And I'm going to stop the recording right now.
Okay.